Welcome back to another episode of the Emotional Mastery Podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things emotional healing, self regulation, really healing mind, body, and soul. Because I believe that truly starts with quote unquote, mastering the emotions. And it's not so much mastering the emotions. It's not like you're going to become a master of your emotions, rather, just mastering the tools and understanding when to pull out those tools when you need them to understand what your emotions mean. Because a lot of times our emotions are just really big and they can be really overwhelming. And I truly think that in order to heal mind, body, soul, like we have to regulate our emotions. We have to understand what they're telling us because I believe that they are here to be our guidance system, right? They're here to show us what is for us and what is not for us. So recently, there's just been like so much going on. A lot of emotions are coming up, and just kind of just a lot of understanding of that, right? Like taking that new perspective. And I truly think that like through every emotional wave that we have, through every emotional wave that we encounter, because we're going to constantly be going up and down, there's just new lessons for us to learn in that, right? There is so much beauty in the pain, and it doesn't always feel like that, and it's really hard to understand that and to see that, but there truly is, like when obviously when you come on the other side of it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, it's easy and just like feel your feelings, right? Like it's really hard to actually do that in the moment, right? And it's having these tools and like understanding what that means. And I noticed I've been like so on another level, with the podcast and with business and just like working a lot. And there have been things I noticed that like when I this is kind of how I cycle through things. But when I am feeling something intensely, it is easier for me to launch myself into work. It is easy for me to keep myself busy so that I don't actually have to deal with the thing, right? But it never actually really goes away. And so there's a situation that I was noticing that was kind of quote unquote, I'll use air quotes, was easy in the beginning and has really become difficult now. And it's because like it's really coming back and showing me like I have to process through these things. And there's part of me that feels that confusion of, well, do I continue trying with this thing? Do I continue trying to like say the same thing that I feel like I'm saying over and over and over? And kind of like oversharing, right, is sort of that trauma response. And it's not even so much like the oversharing. It's like our mind cycles through these like what ifs, right? Like, what if I had shown up more? What if I had said this? What if I had been more vulnerable? And vulnerability is really hard. I think it's something that as adults, um, you know, we all have been hurt with being vulnerable, right? And so it's a really powerful place to be able to be vulnerable. But there's also a point where you have to understand that you have to come back to yourself and what you truly believe and what you truly know. And so that's the key, right? And I think for me, movement, meditation, all of these things, and again, just understanding what my emotions are saying. Like if you are constantly in a situation where your emotions are low or you're cycling through these like really intense emotions, likely the thing isn't for you. And that really sucks sometimes because there's so many factors that go into it. There's so many things that feel really good. Um, Obviously I'm specifically not obviously, but I am specifically talking about like relationships right now, but it's not even so much that, right? Like if something just isn't for you, you're going to feel it and you're going to know it. And our mind likes to question that. And our mind likes to make us second guess that. And yeah, it's just like really important to come back to those emotions, and they can get really hard. They can get really deep because we want what we want. And it's really important and really empowering to come from this space of, okay, so my emotions are telling me this thing. And then having the awareness to realize that you are, for me in this situation, like I was shrinking myself down to meet the situation where it was instead of asking it to meet me where I was. And that's a really empowering place to be, but it's not an easy place to be. It would be easy to just be like, hey, okay, let's try it again. Or, you know, whatever it is, and continually coming back down to that space of where the thing is at. But calling it in, and I think that's a new approach I'm having, and it's taken a long time to get there. Like, I talk about all these tools, and sometimes I think it sounds really uplifting, like, yeah, if it's meant for you, it'll be for you, or if it's meant for you, it won't miss you. And I think those things like really do get me through a lot of the heaviness and a lot of the stickiness and a lot of the lows. But sometimes when I'm in those lows and I'm saying it, like my mind knows that it's true. Like, yeah, what's meant for me won't miss me, right? Like what's meant for me will show up in the way that I need it to, when I need it to, at the right time, if it's meant for me. And I think we want things to be for us. So we make excuses and we lower ourselves, we lower our standards so that we think, or we're convincing ourselves that it is showing up for us, but it's really not in the space that we need it to be. And so being able to see and be like, no, like this is what I want. And maybe this thing can't meet me here, but it doesn't mean that nothing is not going to, like it doesn't mean that nothing is going to not be able to meet me here, right? There is something that is for me that will be able to meet me in the space that I need it to meet me at. And so that's a powerful insight, I guess, but it's a painful one. And it's one that, yeah, you just have to you have to run through the emotions of it. You have to, like, even earlier today, I was feeling that heaviness and I was feeling that sadness and I was feeling that pain and that rejection and all of those things that just are hurtful and suck and feel like shitty and we don't want to actually feel them. But I was just like telling myself that, this is showing me something. And, when I was taking breaths in those moments, like breathe fully into it and just appreciate that I get to feel things like that, right? Like those things, although they don't feel good, it is cool that I get to experience them. I'm rolling my eyes. I know you can't see it because like I said, I think sometimes logically we say things, but like when we're in it, like no, it is not cool to like feel those things. Like as I said it, I was like, why did I say that? Because it's not cool to feel those things, but it is actually like a beautiful thing, right? Like, there is beauty in pain, and I know we hear that a lot. And I think being able to see that like on the outside of it allows you to remember it on the inside of it, because that's where it's hard, right? It's when you're in it is when it's hard to remember, like, okay, this is actually. And I was reading in a book earlier. What book was it? I think it was Oneness, because I'm slowly working through that. And I know I've talked about that in like 2 or 3 other podcast episodes, but it said that in our darkest, it might have been either Oneness or Wild. I apologize. I don't remember which one. I'm reading both of them simultaneously. But it said our darkest hours in actuality are our shining moments. And that was so profound to me. That was so powerful because, the only way that we're going to change is when the discomfort of being where you're at is greater than the discomfort of change, because change is uncomfortable, right? It is also the only thing that's guaranteed in life, right? Is change. And so, gosh, you guys, I was listening to Joe Rogan's episode with Jewel. If you have not listened to it, go listen to it. Her story is mind blowing. But she was talking about in these moments in her life where she has felt so low and so depressed and like on the verge of committing suicide. Like she was homeless at 15, just like the depth of emotional pain that she has felt in her life and things that she has gone through in her life. But she was saying that she was sitting on the shore, and she was sitting and she literally watched the tides go in and the tides go out. And this was something that changed her life, was this realization that it's always going to change. So no matter where you are in your life, no matter what you're feeling, no matter what intensity of things that you're feeling, it is going to change. It is guaranteed that you're going to change, right? And so it truly is like sometimes we have to hit these dark moments in order for that change to happen for us. Because if we didn't hit those dark moments, right, which then turn into our shining moments, but if we didn't hit those dark moments, we probably wouldn't change, right? Because then we would be complacent in where we're at. And so long-winded way to say that, yeah, I'm just like, I think knowing that on a logical level helps somewhat when we're going through these things. And especially, I think for me, when I get in these really low lows about specific things or when there's people involved, I always want to like share it. Or I think I don't share it in a way that I think I'm sharing it. I think I'm being honest. I think I'm being see through, and I think I'm being transparent. But then in actuality, I think I'm not really. I think I am padding what I'm saying in the hopes that somebody will get it, but obviously nobody's a mind reader, and that's another pattern like I've noticed of myself. But I think like, yeah, when you're in these spaces, just like coming back to that and remembering that, we don't have to trust yourself for one, which is like a really powerful thing and a really powerful space to be in. And that's a huge part of my mission. My goal is to empower people to really come back to that space within themselves that they can fully, fully trust, right? Because it's really hard to do. It's really hard, especially when you're in a space or, entrepreneur, like whatever your life is. You're going to have family members, you're going to have friends, you're going to have colleagues. Like everybody wants to tell you what to do. But like to be able to stand firm in your knowing, because when you show up for yourself, other people are going to get triggered, other people are going to get rubbed wrong, you might lose some friends. But then on the flip side, if you're not showing up for yourself, if you're showing up for other people, then you're not showing up for you, right? And so showing up for you is incredibly important, because it's like at the end of the night, nobody is in your mind but you. And so kind of coming back to that, has been really powerful as I'm like kind of navigating these lows and knowing that like I don't have to share everything with everybody, that is a trauma response. um and I'm coming off like I am starting to hit not a burnout, but have been exhausted the last like few days. I think there's just um I was on this like really high from all this podcast stuff, and I still like feel that so much. I have so many amazing guests like coming to you guys today. I'm having Leanne Kallal of the Glojo podcast on here, and our conversation was so good, so good. I have like 8 or 9 that I'm like in line to edit, and I cannot wait for you to listen to all of them. And I was going to go through like the whole month. Originally I wanted to go through the whole month of December and just like put them out every week. But I am going to take like the last 2 weeks of December off, because I feel myself like getting tired now. Like it'll hit like 3 o'clock and I'm just like, oh my gosh, is it bedtime yet? And like in this episode, Leanne talks about, the lower the lows, the higher the highs. And I think it goes the other way too, right? It doesn't have to be, but typically that's kind of like how it works, just like energetically, because there has to be balance, obviously. But, for me, I've been like on this high and I've been like super excited. I've been like filling myself with being busy and podcast guest interviews and all these really amazing things, and like having my schedule and working all the time. Then, of course, this past week was Thanksgiving. So family and just like being constantly busy, and I need a lot of alone time. That's something I've really come to understand about myself. And so I think like not having that, and also I've been avoiding some emotions. And so you can't avoid them forever. And I think the more in tune I am with my body, the more like I can't, before I could ignore them for years, right? And now it's like a month or two and I'm like, like this just doesn't feel good. And then it comes, even full force back. But yeah, like coming back to yourself. And so I've been really tired of recording this where my kids are like still awake, but they're in their rooms. Cause I'm like, when they go to bed, like I just want to get in bed tonight. Like get in bed, read a book. Like if I'm working, I want to work from bed and just like relax and kind of just rest, right? And be really intuitive about what that means for me, because we can be like so go go go. And yeah, I've really been working to embody the feminine. And because I think we value so much the masculine in our culture, right? The action oriented, the go getter attitude, the aggressiveness, like oh, like I have to have the thing, and the confidence and all of these like really masculine energies, the fire and stuff like that. I always think of like Mars energy, right? That Mars in astrology, Mars is like the action oriented. It's, it's the fire, it's Aries, right? Like it's all that like energy. And then balancing that with the feminine. The feminine is really intuitive. The feminine is compassionate, it's gentle, it's kind, it's nurturing, it's all of these things. And again, I relate that to the Taurus energy, because Taurus is ruled by Venus, and it's feminine and it's grounding and it's sensual and it's all these things. So like we have to have a balance of the two of them. And I think like so often we're just like so much embodying the masculine as a culture, as a society, because that's what's valued. But we have to have this balance. I know like when I was younger, I was always told you're too sensitive, you're too weak. Like when I would cry, like people would literally say like I was weak or like whatever. And so I really had this complex about it. Like I didn't want to be the one that was sensitive. I didn't want to be the one that was too dramatic or emotional. Like I wanted to be like the go-getter. And so I would see these people who were like embodying like women, right? Who were loud, loudmouth, but like outspoken and had all these like masculine qualities. And I really would be like jealous and envious. And then I would see the women that were super in their feminine, but like healthy feminine, right? And then I would be jealous of them. And then like I would look at myself, and like if there were situations where I was going to get dressed up and I was going to put my makeup on and I was going to wear like really pretty clothes, like I never felt feminine in those clothes, right? Like I always felt like I was like a masculine wearing a skirt. And so it's really been this process for me recently of really embodying that feminine. And that to me means like wearing delicate jewelry, right? Like putting my makeup on and really like feeling sexy and sensual in that. I have started completely shifting the way I worked out. Like I used to work out, I would have to run like 3 to 5 miles a day, and I would have to lift heavy weights. And I was just like, oh, you know what I mean? Like if I didn't burn like a certain amount of calories, like I wasn't getting a workout. And so I slowly started to add in just like nature walks or meditation walks, and which was kind of a hard for me at first because I didn't feel like I was getting like a super heavy workout. And then I started doing the class 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that is completely shifted. Like I even noticed my body changing in the way that it looks, right? Like I feel like my waist is getting narrower, my abs are getting a little bit tighter. Like it's wild, like it's crazy. And I truly believe it's because like in doing that kind of movement too, and being super intuitive, and there's a lot of like putting your hands on your body throughout it and coming back to yourself and grounding in yourself. And I think in that, like even having a hand on my heart and a hand on my womb, like I'm truly able to heal. And there's a lot of dance cardio within that too. And we carry a lot of trauma in our hips, and so just kind of being able to move that around and shake that around, it's been a thing. So it's been like really cool, really deep, really intense. And again, I think with that kind of movement too, it's bringing up a lot of the emotions that I was kind of trying to avoid, I guess. So yeah, it's just been kind of sticky, kind of heavy, kind of low. And of course, like this past week has been Thanksgiving. So I think we've been eating more, drinking more. I've also noticed how sensitive my body has been to alcohol lately. I know I've like talked about my up and down with alcohol over the last like 6 months or whatever. I gave it up all summer, and then I'm like up and down with it since like September, I think. But lately, even like the last 2 times I had like 2 drinks, my body is just so sensitive. Like I feel like I can't sleep properly and my heart races and I just like don't feel good. And so that's just been an awareness and a reality I'm having to accept, that my body is just becoming like super sensitive. And I just have to like nourish it in a way that feels good because I don't want to feel bad, right? So anyway, this has been a much longer introduction than I wanted to do, because this episode with Leanne is just awesome and it's a great one. I can't wait for you to all listen to it. She talks about, being emotional and being empathetic and being very feeling, as a creative and in the workplace in a professional setting, and how you can kind of show up and have that balance and embody that feminine, that emotional nature while also being professional. And so this is such a good episode. And I would love for you to rate, review, share, subscribe, tag me, share with a friend, tag me on Instagram, all the things. The more ears we get this podcast to, the more I can continue to show up and bring you amazing guests and, increase the frequency and all of those things. So I appreciate every single one of you, whether you've listened to every episode, whether you've listened to 10 or this is your very first one. I appreciate you so much. And just one last thing before the episode starts, the community space is open, the Emotional Mastery community, and the link is going to be down in the show notes. Our first call is going to be December 15th, and that's really just going to be like intention setting for the new year. But there's human design in here, there's astrology in here, there is gut health in here, there's holistic healing in here, there's spirituality. Like literally, this is my space to like MG. So there's so much in there for you guys. And price is going up in January. It's literally $2 right now. I just like literally just to like help with the cost of like running the community space. But yeah, there's so much in there. And again, our call is December 15th. And even if you can't make it live, there's going to be a replay in there. So head over to the link in the show notes. You can always send me a DM on Instagram. It's at Rochelle, ROCHELLE.Christian, CHRISTIANE. Again, link is in the show notes. Head over there, say hi, DM me, let me know what you think. And without further ado, here is the episode. Well, welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. We met through the Almost 30 Podcast Accelerator program, which has been so amazing for so many reasons. But we were put in a breakout room together and we just immediately connected in there. And I knew I wanted to have you on the podcast. So I'm just going to let you introduce yourself. Awesome. I always ask just as much or as little as you would like about your story, about anything that's happened that has gotten you here today.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you so much for having me here
You're
today.
welcome.
I feel like I'm right at home on the Emotional Mastery podcast because I am definitely I'd say I'm an emotional being. I think we all are, but we're trying to keep it in. My name is Leanne, and I mean, man, what do I want to say? That's like, I guess I'll give a quick introduction. So I have a podcast. It's called the Glow Joe podcast, and it was really founded from my desire to start sharing a lot of the really incredible tools and tips that I get exposed to in the everyday. And so I have an online consulting business, and I work with experts and speakers and authors in the personal development, health and well-being, and spirituality space. And what I do is I help them take their information and create online learning programs and products and experiences. So I feel so grateful that I'm always connected to these different experts and people, and I love learning. I believe in being a lifelong learner. Um, and so I'm always just having these really interesting conversations that have really helped me in my life and to live a more connected life and to really get to know myself more. And I know that's something that you and I think it's a passion that we share is self-awareness and really the self-discovery, this journey of discovering and being true to who you are. And so, yeah, I work with all these cool people, and then I've started this podcast to help share these different things that I've learned over the years working with them. But I guess kind of like a little bit just to backtrack, like how I got to here where I am today. In 2009, I moved overseas to Kuala Lumpur, and I was working over at Mind Valley. So I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's an incredible company. If you haven't, I recommend everyone go check it out. They have really amazing online courses and experiences to really help in all areas of your life. So I was working over there in the online marketing industry. And at the time, my best friend and I decided it was time for us to move on, time for us to start our business. And we started a consulting business, and we were working with other online companies, and we were helping them with their marketing and promotions. We also had an online coaching program that was focused on helping women create online businesses. And our whole thing was like, do what you love every day. And I was waking up every day and I'm like, I love my lifestyle, but I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. And I felt so inauthentic and it was just misaligned. And I'm like, it's not all misaligned, but I knew that there was something there that wasn't resonating with me. And when I took a closer look at what was actually going on there, it was like and there was no fault. Like, I really think the industry was way different. This is back in like 2011. So the industry's developed a lot over the years. But the companies I was working with, I was helping them sell products that I truly didn't believe in. Not because I didn't believe in the information, but because they weren't well done. And it was a really crappy user experience and customer experience. I'm like, this does not feel good. And so we parted consulting ways. We're still best friends. And this is when I started the journey of product development. I'm super empathic. I didn't know this at the time, but I'm really empathic, and I've always been really in tune with what other people experience and how they feel. And it was through this, like me just starting to pay attention, like through all the projects we worked on, I was always like, well, what about the product? And how is it for the user? And what's going on there? And so I think it was 2013, 2014 is when I really just started the journey of product development. And, I'm like, well, people hire me to do this. I have no idea. I've never heard of anyone doing this. I'm not trained in it. But it was like, yeah, okay, let's give it a go. I got my first project. It was 3 months long. It was hell in so many ways, but I learned a lot, and I realized like, okay, proof of concept. People do need support with this. It was just the wrong client, but I was really proud of how the project turned out. And ever since then, I've just continued to like really start to learn more about this. So I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I'm a master NLP practitioner. I've studied Reiki. I've studied astral or Akashic records. So ever since then, it's just been between personal exploration and wanting to improve myself and the products and services that I offer, and then also working with all of these really interesting people I work with, I have studied and been trained in a lot of different things, and that's what brings me here today. I'm really passionate about like providing a space for the right brain creatives of the world and for the soulful feelers. And I think that we're just emotions need to be honored, and that we're so often just kind of made to feel wrong for feeling what we feel. And I want to change that. I want them to be like at the forefront and honored, and something that's just normal for us to pay attention to, like the clothes we wear. So
I
there's my
love that.
long winded.
I love that so much. That is so amazing. It's such a unique like business perspective, right? Because I think as an entrepreneur, as a creative, it can be really confusing because I am empathic, highly emotional, highly
Yeah.
sensitive, emotional, all those things. And I think it's like, in the business world, you have to be this like driven and like cold almost. And it's like, what do you do with all of those emotions that do come up? Like I was literally told once, like I cried in front of my boss and somebody was like, you can't do that. And I was like, but I was just like, I felt so much in that moment, and it was, so I think that's such a beautiful approach to business and to be able to help people have that, be emotional and honor that.
Yeah.
So for you, like when I know you said that you realized like you're empathetic, from viewing these things as like a product, as the consumer, the user perspective, but like what was the thing that really like was understanding that or learning that what kind of like launched you into the more of the spiritual stuff, or like did that come first which then led you to
Yeah.
realize you're empathetic? Like how did that, like the shift?
Good question. Yeah, really good question. So I think so. I was like, even from a young age, like in my early 20s, I was obsessed with finding my dharma. How I even knew what that word was, I don't even know. But I had started to dabble and read books, and I was really drawn to the spirituality space and that sort of thing. Then when I moved overseas and started working at Mind Valley at the time, it was a lot of personal development and spirituality, and it still is. And so I was exposed in this culture so much there. I think it was at that time when I was living overseas that I really started to, I didn't know it though. And this was the thing. So it was all kind of in retrospect. And there was this one moment that I'll share in a minute that really had me be like, oh, and it opened my eyes and started to change everything in my journey. But I remember when I was over at Mind Valley, I was the girl who would cry in the office. I would cry all the time. And I also did get bucked off a horse. I was taking horse riding lessons and like landed on my head. And I think I did really have a concussion that impacted me. And I was just young and untreated. And so I think there was that. But I actually was this person who cried a lot. And I felt so, and even throughout the years, in different situations and with friends, and they didn't mean this in a bad way, but they're like, you're too sensitive. You're just too sensitive. You're just too emotional. And I would make myself wrong for that. And I think back and it's like, I'm not mad at them. It's like, okay, they could have done it. Like things could have been a little different. I think we were young, but I'm sad that I made myself wrong for that. And so over at Mind Valley, when I looked back and realized like, oh, I'm empathic, we were a bunch of young people who had moved to a completely foreign country from around the world. Of course, we're going to be a mixed bag of emotions. And of course, I'm going to be picking up on it and having and like crying and just like, I don't know why I'm crying. Like that would happen a lot. I don't know why I'm sad. I don't know why I'm feeling this. And so the moment when I realized there's something here for me to look at, I was coaching a woman. And she was, I was coaching this older woman, and she had a goiter, a really big goiter. And I was like, well, and I just started to actually see almost like it was weird. And this sounds so woo woo, but it's like I was kind of started to see the emotions and see something in there that like you couldn't visibly see with the eye, but you can visibly see with the eye, but I could see it. And then we were having this conversation, and I'm like, well, it's okay that you feel angry about this. And she was like, what do you mean? I don't feel angry. I never said that. And I was like, what you like? And it was in that moment where I'm like, she didn't actually say it, but I could feel her anger and I could see her anger. And then there was just more things that started to happen. I would go back home. I remember a couple times I was visiting my parents, and I would be in the basement, and then my parents' room was like, there's the main floor basement. They'd sleep upstairs, and I would wake up and I'm like, oh, my neck is so sore, and my shoulder. I'm like, that's weird. And I would walk upstairs, and my mom would be like, my neck is so sore in my shoulder. So for me, I'm definitely I'm empathic and intuitive in a way where I I receive information in multiple ways, and one of them is kinesthetic. And so it was this really, really confusing experience to feel emotions and to feel people's physical pain and not know what was going on. And so it was when I had that experience with the woman that I was coaching, when I said, I'm like, well, it's okay to be angry. And she was so disconnected from her anger. And I wonder if it had to do with the throat chakra and the goiter that was on her throat, and that's when the light bulbs went off for me, and that's when I started to learn more about what does it mean to be an empath, and how do you start to honor this. And then I've learned more about being a highly sensitive person as well. And I remember when I was young, my mom would say, I'm a highly sensitive person, and I'm like, yeah, and I would just kind of roll my eyes. Um, and there were years where I was like, this sucks. This really sucks. This is a really hard way to live. This isn't fair. And I would feel like a victim. And I'd be like, but you don't understand how hard life is. And then people would say, like, this is actually a gift. And I think I'm at the point in my life now where there still are the difficulties. This is not, I'm not, like, definitely a journey. And I think it's going to be a journey my entire life. But I can see now how this is a gift. And instead of feeling like the odd one out or unprofessional or like there's something wrong with me when I'm working with a company or when I'm working with clients, I've learned to be able to use my empathy and use my emotions to guide me to support others and also to guide me to build my business as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that so much. That's such a beautiful story in a way that, like, as you were talking about the
Yeah.
energy of that goiter, that's what I was thinking. Like, that was most likely probably her anger in
Hmm.
that, and I think that as somebody who I there's so much in my human design and my astrology that talks about my voice, and then my voice was the thing that, like, I always felt like I didn't have. It was the thing that I always felt like was taken away from me for so much of my life. So, like, reconnecting with that through this podcast and through my space and stuff like that, it's such a beautiful thing. And like you said, I think when we're younger, or just our culture in general, because I was raised, and again, human design perspective, I'm emotionally defined, but I'm the only emotionally defined person in my family. And it's not to say that if you're undefined emotionally, you're not emotional, because you're undefined,
I am.
but
Yeah.
you pick up and you amplify the emotions of others intensely. And so being defined emotionally and riding this wave of emotions, it is uncomfortable for people who are undefined because you feel it so intensely that
Hmm.
I think, this is my perspective and what I've learned along the way, that I think that undefined people have a hard time understanding how, like, we can live like that, right?
Yeah.
Because you feel it so intensely. So my parents were always like, oh my gosh, like, you're too sensitive, you're too dramatic, you're like, or if I was in a low of my wave, they would think I was depressed and I need to get help. And they wanted to help me and give me all these tools and, like, advice. And I was just like, I just want to feel my shit. Like, I don't need somebody
Hmm.
to tell me, like, how to fix it. But it's such a common thing, I think, to just shut it down, right? Because it's so much easier to shut it down than to deal with it. And so, like, even as you were saying that, being too sensitive and too, like, that, like, triggered me, because that's
Yeah.
something I've heard my entire life. Even the other night, my mom was telling me, relaying a conversation she had with someone else who was afraid to come talk to me because I was too sensitive. And I was like, I am not, like, I'm feeling, but I don't understand. And I understand, like, on a logical level, I understand, but it's like, that shouldn't be a reason to not want to have a conversation with me just because I show my emotions. And
Yeah.
I work really hard to, like, honor that now. And especially with my kids, we name our emotions. I make sure
I
they
love
know
that.
it's okay to feel angry. Like, we can deal with it, but, like, let's not suppress it. And so I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think it's so important that our generation is now coming forward and allowing ourselves to feel that, and kind of, like, undoing all of this, emotional conditioning that we've had, because
Yeah.
it's big. It's yeah, it's hard.
I agree, and it's so interesting because I think in society we really are emotions are viewed as weak, and often it's like it's weak to be vulnerable, and this is starting to change, like thanks to like brilliant people like Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle and these women who are writing these books and getting this, like spreading this message. And there's a lot of other people out there as well, but I'd say typically they're not viewed in a positive light, and we are taught to just stuff them down and not pay attention to them and to not honor them and to not listen to them. And I think that when we start to shut down our emotions, then we're actually shutting down ourselves. We're not connected with the truth of who we are. We're not honoring it, and we're choosing to, it's like just kind of like it's almost like we become robots. Like, what's the point? Like, emotions are what makes us human. This is what, like, we are here, we are human, we're in the physical form, we're on this like physical earth plane right now. Like, this is what we're here to do. And so why not lean into it? Why not get curious? Why not look to them to see? Like, I'm a firm believer that emotions are guidance in business and life and in love and everything. Emotions are our built-in personal GPS system. They're not showing up to like be like, I'm going to mess up your day. They're showing up to be like, hey, there's something going on here that you can take a look at more closely. So yeah, I totally, and it's fun, like not, I did not show up as my best self, but last week my mom and I got in like quite a knockdown, like quite a fight. And she was like, you're so dramatic. And
I
I'm
get
like,
that all the time too.
I'm like, maybe I am dramatic, but I have emotions. No. And so I do think that though, so then just to like play on that, it is about learning how to, I don't want to say like regulate in a way to suppress, but like how can we be responsible with our emotions, and how can we how can we tune into them for information, and how do we not let them just like overrun our life? Because there probably have been times of my life where I am making decisions from a highly emotional state. I'm probably not making decisions that are the best for me, the situation, or other people involved. So I do think that with great emotions comes great responsibility.
Yeah. Well, and like you said with Brene Brown and Glennon Doyle, like I love the rawness of their books and everything they're teaching and talking about, because it is not easy to be vulnerable like that.
No,
Right.
it's
But it is
not.
so powerful. And like you said, as you were saying it too, I was thinking, I was like, because our emotions are our GPS system. And then you said it, but it truly is. And yeah, I think the trick here is to like, again, like we have so much conditioning to get over from being told we're too sensitive, too emotional, and
Mhm.
feelings are wrong and weak and all those things. But then it's, yeah, emotional regulation. And this podcast, like emotional mastery, it's not so much like mastering your emotions, like I'm a master of my emotions, right? It's like it's having those tools to be able to self-regulate, to allow the emotions to be your guidance system rather than becoming your emotions. And I think there's a
Yeah.
really big distinction there, because for so long, like, yeah, I was like overrun by my emotions, right? Like I was such a victim, and it was like, oh, my emotions were so big and I had to let everybody know about them. And that was just like, and it's like, no, I can feel these really big feelings. And I've recently had this shift where I every time I get in that space where it just feels so low that I just like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need the answer, or my mind gets in the way. And I just kind of shift it, and I'm like, I am so grateful that I get to be on this planet as a human right now, feeling things so deeply and complex in the way that I get to, and to understand what that means,
Yeah.
instead of just being like, oh my gosh, like it's so much, like I can't do this. And, so I think it's really important to, yeah, have those tools to regulate and not just like, but it's not an easy process.
Yeah,
It's
no.
not an easy process. It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. And like I said, like even now, like I will have days where I'm just like, this is like, I do fall into that. It's easy to fall into that victim mindset and blame like everybody else. But yeah, I definitely want to go back to, yeah, like being emotional. Like you said, you would cry at work, right?
Mhm.
And like I have had that experience too. And so how did you, like if you are in that situation now, if that comes up, how do you shift that perspective, or how do you have that conversation with somebody, or how do you show up in that way with somebody now, and it be okay, I guess? Does that make sense? Like how do you navigate
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So, okay, where do I want to start with this? Because this is a big. So, I think that, okay, wow, there's so many different, I have so much to say. I have so much to say. Where do I want to go with this? But for quickly, what I do want to just go back and touch on, because there's something you said about like feeling deeply and being a victim, something and feeling that, because it can be easy to like, why me? This is so hard. Life is so hard. I feel so much. What I remind myself is that like the lower the lows, the higher the highs. And I'm like, this really sucks. And you're feeling this really deeply and it's hard. But it's also this capacity that I have that allows me to experience more joy, more pleasure, more excitement than most people could probably even imagine. Like you might need to do a lot of drugs to be able to feel what I can like just feel, because hey, I feel good or I'm really in the moment experiencing something. So I guess I just wanted to share that for anyone listening who also can relate to the lows. We also get probably better highs.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And I think like in looking back at like my journey with alcohol,
Yeah,
when I like started drinking less and less was when I could lean more into that and I could get that feeling from myself and not
yeah,
from the alcohol. And that was a really powerful thing to be able to show up as myself and just be in that high space of like
right.
feeling like I'm like on drugs or something, but I'm not, I'm just like, I'm in my own energy, my own space. And that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so now going back to the question though, like, so what have I done? Like, how have I learned? Because I don't want to say like, how have I learned not to cry in professional settings? Because I still do, and I get really emotional. Now I'm not. I guess there's two things that I'll talk about here. So the one thing that I've realized is that when I'm not in an office space anymore. I work with clients all virtually, and I have for years. And so I think I probably feel less, less on a daily basis than back in the day when I was in an office full of these young, probably emotionally unprocessed people. So I think that setting makes a difference. So I will say that. But even when I go in and work with different businesses and organizations, you can tell if they're healthy or not. And there can be a lot of dysfunction. And I think that dysfunction is normal in like it's going to show up in one way or another in companies, but there's the dysfunction that still is kind of like it feels okay and you're working through it. And then there's the really unhealthy um, toxic dysfunction. And so I am very intentional about who I work with and who I choose to surround myself with. And I'm fortunate that I've been able to build a business who I can really, choose kind of who I want to work with. It feels privileged saying that, but I've worked hard and I've been able to build this up. And so I think one, being really, really mindful about your surroundings. And it was not too long ago that I was in a really toxic environment and I felt like there was something wrong with me. And I look back at that and I'm like, man, I still, even knowing that I'm sensitive and that I pick up on things, I was still making myself wrong. I wouldn't cry in meetings, but there'd be times where I'd get off of calls and I would cry, just kind of melt down or feel really, really exhausted. Um, and looking back, I'm like, I know I'm really sensitive and I'm the canary in a coal mine, essentially. And even if nobody else sees the dysfunction, I feel it and see it way sooner. And so now, a couple years later, things are starting to crumble and fall with at this place. And really, I feel like more is becoming exposed. And so that's very interesting for me to be able to look and see, but I removed myself from that situation. And I think that it was also what I would say, it's like it's having the courage and having the awareness to know that what you're feeling is valid. Don't discredit your feelings. And so if you do cry, if you do get upset, don't make yourself wrong for it, but spend some time looking at like, what exactly am I feeling? And why am I feeling this way? And then being okay with that. And then figuring out what actions do I need to take next. And one of the tools that I'll use when I have a lot of emotion, whether it's in business or life, is really locate, label, accept. Locate, okay, what's going on? My body, like I'm feeling this in my chest. And then it's label, well, it feels tight and maybe it feels angry or there's a lot of sadness right now. And then just accepting it and being okay with it. And I think that so often This is where when you're in an office setting or in a professional setting and you feel overwhelmed, the more we tell ourselves that we shouldn't be feeling that, the more we're going to start feeling shame and blame and guilt and all of these other things that are going to manifest and come out in these different ways. And so if you're a sensitive person, and I'm guessing if you're listening to this, you probably are, but if you're a sensitive feeler who really is tuned in and can feel things that might not be visible, that might not be heard, but it's the felt sense, trust that and don't make yourself wrong for it. And then the other thing that I'll say is now I do choose to work in like much healthier situations and clients, and I have so many meetings where I'm in a product development session and I get teary and I cry because I'm deeply moved or something really touches me. And you know what? They're totally okay with it because we have similar values. And I mean, in some ways, it's like, wow, your work is really touching me. And like, I feel that deeply. Or there was this one product I was working on, and it was a grief product. And that's heavy. There's a lot of stuff that goes with grief when you're teaching people how to deal with grief. And my grief came up with things that have gone on in my personal life. And I cried and I was okay with it. And so I think that I've been able to surround myself with these situations, but the common theme there is being okay with it and not making yourself wrong, but then getting clear on okay, now what? What's the next thing that I can do from here? Is it having a conversation with someone? Is it expressing your emotions? Is it knowing like, hey, this is really not aligned with me anymore? And that's like the place that the company I worked with before. For some people, it might be a great fit. For me, it was not aligned and it was toxic for me. Not saying it's toxic in general. It might be. I have my theories. But I think it's just really being able to be in tune with yourself and not make yourself wrong.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I like
Yeah.
how you said, you get to choose your clients now, which is a really
Mm-hmm.
cool place to be. And I think when I first was doing like freelance photography and freelance marketing and things like that in the beginning, I just felt like I had to accept everybody, right? Because I was just like, oh my gosh. And so like when you show up to these client meetings, when you're deciding if you're going to take somebody on, what does it look like showing up from that heart-centered space, that emotional space, like, and making that decision? Is that something that you make clear in the beginning? Is that just, like, how do you navigate that decision to work with a client or not and bring that in?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a lot of my business comes from word of mouth. And so birds of a feather flock together, I'd say. And so now that I'm in a pretty good flow, there's that positivity coming from there. A lot of times and then I'd also say as well in my proposals and what I share, I use language that attracts people who value what I value. And so I believe that anyone can make a product, like anyone can make an ebook or a PDF or a video course or an audio course, but I focus and specialize in making transformational products. And so I work with people who value truly helping other people and transforming other people's lives. And so right to begin with, I think it's in the languaging, and that's being really in tuned with. And that's one of the ways I think you can use your emotion and your empathy in business is being really tuned into what does your client want? What's important to them? What are their pain points? And not pain points in the way of like you want to get in there and use that to manipulate them. It's understanding their challenges and what they're going through and being connected with that. And then knowing how you can actually speak to them to show them, hey, I understand you, either because I am you or I experience what you experience, or because I can connect with that with my empathy. And here's a way out. And here's what I can offer you. And so I think that even just in the language and how I share things and what I do, it's very value based and it's very connection based. And it's like using language that's important to those people. So I think that's one way, it's being really in tune with their needs and then making sure that like you want to help them, and making sure there's that fit. And then a lot of times it's having a conversation, it's almost like I'm interviewing them in some ways. And it's a feeling. It really is felt sense. And sometimes I'll be like, this seems like it would be the most amazing thing, but it just doesn't feel right. And I've learned to trust that and to listen to it. And there's been times where I haven't listened to it. And I'm like, oh, but it'll be easier. Oh, but it's like quick, easy money. And it's hell. And something happens for whatever reasons. And so I do have a checklist of certain things that are important to me to work with clients, to take them on. And so I'd say make your list of your ideal client. So often I think we do. I know for years I was like, oh my God, they want to work with me. Great. I'll like, woohoo, I'll work with anyone who wants to work with me. And it was not great. It was really, really taxing and tiring. And so then I realized like, wait, it's not just them choosing me, it's me choosing them. And so get really clear. What are your requirements? And what do you need to be able to show up and thrive and be successful and flourish and help these people?
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Do you do so I love that you said like birds of a feather flock together, and I
Yeah.
immediately thought like law of attraction, what you put out, you get back. So
Yeah.
do you do any sort of manifestation work? Like what does that look like for you? Or is it just because I think like a lot of times we talk about manifestation, and I think for a lot of people, like it's not even an intentional thing. I think you're just within that energy and it just flows for you and you don't have to think about it. And
Yeah.
I think for the people who intentionally try to manifest, it's almost like pushing it, right? Because we do have to just like let go and let it happen. So if you have any sort of manifestation
Oh.
practices, like what does that look like?
Oh man. Well, there's two. So I'm a manifester in human design and splenic. And so I guess I feel, I don't know if that means that it comes easy for me, but it doesn't always come easy. It doesn't always come easy, but I am very intentional. I've always been very intentional about the type of life I want to create and how I want to feel. And so I'll think about like, freedom's been really important to me. Travel has been really important to me. Being of service, helping people in their mission, feeling purposeful. I like nice things. I don't think there's anything wrong with liking nice things. I like to live a nice life. And so I'll go through and I will do visioning in these different areas of my life. And I absolutely love the book Magic. It's called The Magic, and it is a 28-day gratitude practice. And this was written by the lady who wrote The Secret, which is when I think we all started to learn about the law of attraction. And this book really talks about the power of gratitude, and it takes you through these different practices. First of all, she's like, get clear on what you want in all these areas of your life. And then get clear on, then you do these practices and go throughout. And when I've done this, magic literally happens. But I usually get, and I know they say for me, my strategy is undefined. And so I'm not really supposed to have much of a strategy. But when I've manifested big things in my life, I usually have a clear idea of what it is I'm looking for. And then I usually pay attention to like, well, why do I want that? How is that going to make me feel? Because I think it's not just about the physical things, it's about the feeling and how we want to feel. And I'll connect with that. And then just recently, as I've been backtracking, because I'm like, wait, there's a couple areas of my life. I'm like, how come things aren't changing? What the hell? And so then I backtracked. I'm like, when have I been able to really manifest the things that matter to me and these big things? It's when I can visualize it in my mind. And there are this one area that I cannot visualize it. And I'm like, damn, isn't that interesting? And so I've been actually just backtracking and being like, what was I doing at those times in my life when I was in flow, when it came easily, when everything was aligned? And something I personally noticed was, the visualization. So say, think back for anyone listening, think back to those times when it was easy, when it was in flow, when you were naturally attracting what you want or who you wanted. What was your life like then? What were you doing? What were the practices? Because I do think it's different for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was going to say. I think it's that we don't give that emotion, that feeling enough
Yeah.
credit, and just like allowing ourselves to sit in that and be like really immerse yourself in like what
Yeah.
that thing feels like to have it. Because I think like once you really embody that feeling, then you can move forward as if you have the thing
Yeah.
already. And I think that's powerful because I know for me, as you were saying, that when I've manifested the things that I want, it's times where I'm just lit up and I'm in flow with life, and I'm actually not even caring about the thing that I want to
I
bring in,
know.
right? It's like you let it go and then it like comes to you. And so a lot of times for me, I think sometimes when I manifest things, I don't even see it as manifestation because it's just like it just comes in. And then
It's
afterwards I'm like, oh yeah, like even with the podcast accelerator, like I was doing, I do Lacey Phillips to be magnetic work. And it was
yeah.
like, make a list of things that you manifested. And I couldn't even think of anything. I'm like, what have I manifested recently? And then I was like, oh yeah, this like amazing program that I'm in that I didn't even like, but when I look back
Mhm.
at the process of it, that was 100% manifestation because it was a thing that I wanted, but I released it and I just went on with life and I was feeling good and there it went, So I think that's really cool. And then how did your, like, I know you talked about like the NLP, the hypnosis, all
Yeah.
these things, like how did all of these practices then combine in your business to just like where did that take you in your business? Did things start like thriving more in that, or you just became more in touch with yourself? Like how did all of that like align with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so I think for me, just at the very root core of it, like studying and having those certifications made me feel more confident, and it made me feel more confident and capable. And it was good to show clients like, hey, like I'm not just making all of this stuff up. There, I have studied different things, but that being said, I think it's a trick that we think we need to study everything before we actually take action. And so don't let that hold you back if you're like, oh, I need to go get this, because I still think I'm like, I need to have this to be able to do this, and that's not the case. For me, I was really drawn to NLP and hypnotherapy because I wanted, like, NLP stands for neuro linguistics programming, and to me this really means the language of the mind. And I think language and the words we speak are so powerful, and that what we think does become a reality. And so this is going back to the law of attraction again. And it's crazy what we speak. There's I've never been able to find like a more to like narrowed in stat, but they say 40 to 95% of what we do is habitual. And so let's just say that's 50%. That means that we're operating 50% based off of habit. And oftentimes this is our subconscious mind is ruling our life. And so for me, studying these things was a way for me to better understand why we do the things we do. Why do we keep doing things that make us feel like shit? Why do we stay in these cycles? Why do we say we want one thing, but we do another? And oftentimes, I think it's because of these limiting beliefs and programming that we have from a younger age, from parents, from society, from past lives. If you believe in that sort of thing, it can come in all these different areas, and they're actually running the show. And so these are tools to really help you get in tune with that part of yourself and start to rewire and understand what's going on, and then be able to program more good and change those beliefs. And thoughts, beliefs, what we speak, it all matters, and it all really makes a difference. So I think that going through those programs really helps me personally improve and to become a better version of myself. And then it also helped me to understand how in business, what we say and what we write. And let's say if somebody's creating a program, how can they share information in a way that is going to be received well on the other end, especially online. Online education is a whole different game than, getting into in a room and being in person and holding a workshop and an event. It's completely different when it's online. And so that just gave me more tools to understand how people learn, process information, and how I can apply that to, truly help people create transformational products.
Mm-hmm. That is, I could talk about that topic like all day too, because I think it's so fascinating that, yeah, like we all want to like change or do better or be better, but we're so run by this like unconscious, subconscious side of ourselves. And, in human design, we have the conscious and we have the unconscious side. And the unconscious is like, for me personal, in my personal studies with human design, I really focus on that because that's the things that we don't necessarily, like you said, it just kind of like takes over and it's on autopilot and we're just like running. It's like, yeah, we can say we want to do something this way, but then our body does something this way. And we're like, where's the disconnect between that?
Yeah.
And I think that's like, shadow work. I do a lot with shadow work. And I think that's
Mhm.
a really powerful part of the process in undoing that or rewiring that unconscious side of ourselves. And I haven't done NLP. I'm familiar with it. I've read a book on
Yeah.
it. So I'm not like an expert in any way in that. But yeah, I think there are just, it can be really frustrating on this journey to know where you want to go, to have that visualization, to have those feelings. And then you're like in the face of something and you choose this way that you've always done before. And it's so infuriating. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I'm not like growing at all. But then I always have to remind myself, like, just that awareness in itself is really powerful, right? And then it's like the next time and having grace with myself. So
So,
for,
I have something to say on
yeah,
that.
of
And
course.
so, because it's true. I think that when you're on a journey of personal development and you're like putting all this effort in and you're learning and you're doing all these things and all these practices, and then you still make these choices that aren't aligned, you can feel down. So yes, it's so important to have compassion. But the one thing in NLP, what they say, there's these different parts of us, and it's something called parts integration. And so each part of us, even there's going to be a part of us that's like, eat the healthy thing. And then there's going to be the part of us that's like, eat the bag of, or the other part that's like, eat the bag of chips. And we might choose the bag of chips. Well, that part, it's about understanding that we have all of these different like little mini me's and parts, and they actually all want what's best for us. They just have different ways of going about it because of our conditioning. And so when you start to see it through the lens of, I'm not a total mess up. I'm not like, instead of beating ourselves up, being like, oh, there's this part of me that is choosing this for me because it genuinely thinks that it's, it's making the right choice.
Mhm.
And there's different processes you can do it consciously, but then there's other processes like to really get into this and see, what does this part want? And at the end of the day, most of the time, the different parts of us want love, acceptance, support, happiness, joy, all the things, but their way of seeking it is comfort and safety. And it's like, ooh, those chips are going to make me feel loved or give me comfort. And so I think it's really important to realize that there are just all these parts of us that do truly want what's best. They're just a little mixed up and confused as to what truly is best for us. And they run off of old operating systems that may have worked at one point in our lives, but they're not working right now.
That's what I was going to say. I think it's what kept us safe before. And
Mm-hmm.
it's reminding, like I journal every single morning. I do like a little paragraph, but I'm like, I am safe. I am safe to feel. I am safe
Yeah.
to love. I am safe to be. I'm safe. I'm worthy. Like all of these things, just to remind my system and my body that it's like, yes, maybe that doing this kept me safe at one point, but I am safe now that I can do
Yeah.
this, And NLP actually sounds a lot like, have you heard of IFS, internal family systems?
No, but I saw on your website IFS and I was like, what is IFS? I
Yeah.
meant
So
to ask you.
IFS, it's something I want to further study more. I did a program, a year-long program, and the very first section of it was 3 months of IFS training, essentially. It's I think to become certified, you have to be a psychologist, so I wouldn't be able to take it to that
Yeah.
level. But just the knowledge of it was so powerful for me, and it really helps you unblock a lot, because the idea, like you said with NLP, it's the idea of IFS is that there are all these parts, these fragmented parts of ourselves, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
like anger, or you have like, maybe you had a father that was always like, you're not enough, or if you do that, you're not enough, right? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
all those voices in your head are these parts of yourselves from your conditioning, from somebody that said something. And so the process within IFS is you kind of go into, it's almost like a little sort of meditation, right? You kind of, if you're spiritual, you can call in your guides, your ancestors, anybody to support you within that space. If you're not spiritual, you don't have to even go there. You just sit and get in tune with yourself and your knowing. And then you take a few minutes to just like feel your body. Like, what is going on in your body in this stillness? Are you nervous? Is your stomach? Are you having like a tickle on your wrist, or literally anything that's going on in your body? And then you go there and you really ask these parts to come forward. And so you come to it from a higher self perspective,
Mm.
from this place of love, from this heart-centered space, and you allow these parts to really speak their truth, what they
Yeah.
need. And a lot of times, like, it's going to be this little inner child that's like the 5-year-old that was like shamed, or the 7-year-old that was hit, or, it's like all these little parts, and it's like the anger, it's the sadness, it's the pain, it can be the joy, right? And so you kind of like run through that and you let it say what it needs to say, you let it do its thing with the higher self. And then at the end of the session, the idea is to get to a place where you've accepted that part, or you've allowed that part to speak non-judgmentally. And then you let it know that whenever it needs to come forward, you can create a space, like check in once a week. And then you just kind of like, for me, the ending of one of mine was just this little girl was playing in puddles and she just, you know what I mean? She wanted to play. And it was a very powerful and beautiful thing. And as you were talking about NLP and your parts, it really kind of reminded me of that, because
Yeah.
we do have all these parts that we've suppressed that we don't allow to speak. And it's a really powerful thing, because those things, yeah, they're just in there. And, you know, like the saying, hurt people, or people who are hurt, people who are angry or act out in certain ways want love the most. They just don't know how to get it in a healthy way. And
Yeah.
so that's really, really powerful. So,
Yeah, it sounds super similar, like super, super similar. I love when there's these different modalities, but like at the core and at the root, it's the same. I think it always
mhm.
means like it works.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely does. There's something I have a question of something we
Yeah.
kind of talked offline on. I think it might have been in the breakout room or in our chat,
Mhm.
but you had said how um, coming on this spiritual journey and like having more of the spiritual beliefs, and you had mentioned Reiki within that conversation,
Yeah.
that it's been I don't know how to word it, but like bringing that into your personal life with your friends and things like that. Like there's been some resistance to that, or showing up fully as that version of yourself. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, so it's interesting because when you say that, I'm immediately like pointing the finger at myself. So I have it's been and I say that because right now when so I think that it's so tricky. So I'll say like I have a lot of really loving friends and they truly accept me and that feels really great to be at the point where they accept me. And I think they've probably accepted me for who I am a lot longer than I realized, and that I wasn't accepting me. And that's why I'm like, I'll point the finger at myself because when I am the odd one out in a lot of ways, and I'm sure that maybe they all feel like they're the odd one out in another way, but I definitely walk to the beat of my own drum. I've chosen a different path. It can be challenging, and sometimes it can feel lonely and I can feel like, is there something wrong with me? And I'll start to question. It's like looking at their life experience and how things flow for them versus what flows for me and how I feel versus how I perceive their life to be. And so I think it's always really important to surround yourself with like-minded people and surround yourself with people who accept you. And so I do have a lot of people in my life who maybe we don't connect with each other on everything, but we can connect with each other on this one piece and on this one piece. And so over the years, it's like I kind of have the friends that I can like I know I can talk to them about this, and that's where we're really going to thrive and we can have fun together. And there's going to be people over here, but I'd say it's been the biggest overarching theme is accepting myself and accepting my personal path and learning to not compare. And that's way easier said than done. And I still find myself falling into comparison, even with the podcast group we're in right now. I'm like, oh my God, like comparing myself. And so it's like, man, how do we get better? Like, not get better, but how do we work through that? And I think that there's always going to be certain as we grow and step outside of our comfort zone, we're going to feel uncomfortable, we're going to meet new people, we're going to have all these opportunities, and I guess we can choose to look and see like maybe feel like I'm not as good as this person or I'm not doing this or doing that, and it's also like, well, I'm here and what can I learn from this, and I must be doing something right because I am here. And well, there must be some great things because I'm friends with this person who I think, so I think at the end of the day, it's been a shift in my personal perspective and in just accepting myself and learning to like love myself and love my journey. And it might be different and it's mine though, and just cherishing that and honoring it and really learning to not compare. And I've gotten
Mm,
so much better, but it still creeps in, that's for damn sure. But I'm better at being like, nope,
yeah.
we're gonna not letting you drive, you're not in the driver's seat.
Absolutely. I think, and you said something in the beginning too, where it's like we're ever evolving in this journey, right? Like we're never
Yeah.
going to fully like be there. So I think it is a constant journey and a process. And it's funny because the program too, like when we first there I in the short like 7 weeks that this program has been, so much has come up for me, like triggers, things that are really like in my face that I need to heal. Like I was actually really resistant to even engaging in the beginning because like I didn't feel worthy to be part of it. And the more that I realized a lot of us actually felt that way,
Mhm.
or like just this that it's been such a beautiful experience for me, like in hindsight over it, and especially in the last few weeks, like connecting with more of you, and
Yeah.
just that's was part of what like really inspired me to really create this like community in the next year too, because it was just it's such a I think a lot of times, we talk about like the mother wound, the sister wound, and it's such a real big thing. And I know in my growing up, that was my mom. I can see that in her. She has that wounding. And so I always took that on with her, whereas like almost it's always hard for me to talk about my mom because of like, but like there was always that judgment or like that fear of judgment from other people, or she was very resistant to getting close to certain people. And so I always like kind of took that on, where there was just such a lack of trust, especially of women, because I just saw her being so untrusting of people. So it's just been cool to like heal in that space and in that sense. But so, like in those moments, let's say like you are feeling that comparison, or you are feeling like maybe you're feeling emotionally activated or very low or anything like what. So, for you, what are the tools that you have to kind of balance yourself out there, to align yourself back, with yourself through those?
Yeah, that's a really great, and it's so funny because I truly feel like I'm going through it right now. So this is going to be really helpful. Thank you for asking
Yeah, of
these
course.
questions. So I'll think back to, I mean, a lot of times it really comes down to, like, for me, what really helps me is just saying everybody is unique. Everyone, like, everybody has their own journey. What I've experienced in my life is completely different than what you've experienced in your life, than what my friends have experienced in their life. And you cannot compare apples to oranges. You just can't. And so that's so basic, but that truly is what helps me get out of the cycle of being hard on myself. And another thing that I'll do when I'm really feeling down and I'm like, well, this person's doing this and they're way better than me, or this, podcaster is doing this and they have this many downloads. Oh my God. I write a list of things I'm proud of. And that's something, so I'm a huge, I've talked about gratitude already. I love gratitude journaling. But the other thing, and I'll even send messages with a friend of mine, we send each other voice notes on Voxer. And sometimes I'll be like, okay, I need to just share some things I'm proud of, things that I've accomplished, things that I've created, ways that I'm showing up. And when I can start to think of, really, it's like we don't ever acknowledge how far we've come and the obstacles we've overcome and the challenges that we've overcome. Usually we overcome something, we achieve something, we let it sink in for like a few seconds. And then we move on and we're already figuring out what's our next goal. What's this? It's like learning to let ourselves enjoy. And so I do think that I did an episode on this actually. It's like the importance of celebrating and
Mm.
actually letting ourselves truly celebrate something. And when we celebrate something, I think it does sort of soak into our cells in a way that's going to call in more celebrating, and we're going to start to see things from a different point of view. And it doesn't need to be the big things that we celebrate, it can be the small things as well. And so, yeah, when it comes to comparison, I'm always just reminding myself everyone is completely different, even if we have things in common, even if we're best friends or really good friends, we're totally different, apples to oranges. And then making that list, what are like 10 things you're proud of, and how can you start to really like honor your journey, and just know that your soul is here for different lessons and for your personal evolution. And there's going to be different obstacles and things that come up for each of us because we're honoring what we're here to do. It's really not about the other person and what they're here to do. And the other thing that I do when I compare myself, I'll be like, do you know what? They're showing me what's possible. They are showing me what's possible. There, I believe in abundance. I rarely go to a place of scarcity, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'm like, I'll be like, oh man, like, and I more beat myself up. But it's more like, if they can do it, so can I. Thank you for being an example. Thank you for being an example. Thank you for leading the way and showing me what's possible, because now I have an example and like someone I know who is achieving this, and that means I can do it too.
I love that so much. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful reframe for that. And I think I was going to say too, like as you were speaking, that when we are feeling that comparison and triggered or anything by somebody else, it's always a reflection for us. So
Yeah.
that's something I really work intentionally to do, is like when I am triggered by somebody or I am feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm comparing, it's like really stopping and like asking why. What does this person have that I want, or what does this person have?
Totally.
Like, and so just that reframe,
Yes.
I'm going to use that too, of being like, okay, this person is the thing. They are an expander for me. And
Yeah.
within that too, I think expanders can be, I don't want to use positive and negative, but I think like sometimes when we're negatively triggered by somebody, even though like we have that negative feeling, they can still be an expander in that
Yeah.
sense. So I
I
think that's really
agree.
cool.
And I love that
Yeah.
you said that, because, yeah, it really is always an opportunity to be like, okay, well, usually it's like this person is doing something that I want to do, or they're
Mhm.
expressing themselves in a way, or they're creating a life in a way. But there are the instances where there's other things going on as well. But yeah, I love the whole concept of expanders, and yeah, really taking that lens. I'm like, okay, they're showing me what's possible. They're
Yeah.
showing me there's a way, like Jim
Yeah.
Carrey and whatever. So you're saying there's a chance.
Dumb and Dumber.
Thank you. Yes, you read
I
my
love
mind.
that.
I'm like, it's not fully coming out. It's
Yeah.
like more like 1 in a billion or 1 in a million. So you're saying there's a
Saying there's a
chance.
chance. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen the movie in forever. I love that.
Yeah, it's a good
Uh,
one.
so I'll end. I guess I have two more questions for
Okay, cool.
you. So being emotionally undefined, I know we've talked about emotions in this episode. I know we've
Mhm.
talked about like emotions in business and just being like empathetic and stuff. But like, what has your relationship to emotions been in your life, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, good question. Oh man, I feel like I probably was not in tune with them when I was younger. I think I did feel a lot, but wasn't really aware of it and never gave it that much to think about. And then definitely, yeah, I made them wrong for many, many years. And then it's when I started to, yeah, it's when I started to realize like true. And people would say like, this is a gift. And I was like, no, this is not a gift. But when I started to realize that I do feel things deeply, and that it's my responsibility to one, learn how to discern what's mine and what someone else's. That's been a huge part of my journey and evolution in the emotions, and it still is tricky, but I'm a lot better at it. Um, but learning like self-care for empaths, and really, what to do, how to take care of myself energetically, so that that can help me emotionally when it comes to that. And then now I honor them a lot more, and it's like I accept them a lot more, and I validate them. And that's something that I was talking to about, like with a friend last week. I'm like, oh man, I feel so bad for getting so upset, and like, yeah, I did not communicate how I wanted to communicate. And then I was beating myself up, and then but I'm like, no, I need to actually validate like what I was feeling was really true. And yes, I could have expressed it differently, but let's not stay stuck on that. Let's stay focused moving forward. So I don't know if that answered your question,
Mhm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
basically went from not knowing them, really not liking them and being mad at them, learning that they were there, and then learning to honor them.
Mhm. Yeah. Do you know what your cognition is in human design?
I don't.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, it might be feeling.
Oh, is it
So
feeling ego? Are those the two?
no, so cognition is kind of I guess more of an advanced aspect of human
Yeah.
design, or it's more of a one of the layers, a deeper layer
Yeah.
of human design. I don't know what program you've looked, if you
I'm
use
pulling
Jenna
up. I have,
Zoe's.
yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure. She might have cognition in there.
Okay.
But it's just such an interesting, because like I'm emotionally defined, but I also have feeling cognition,
Oh,
which is like
interesting.
all of the emotions, hence the Emotional Mastery podcast.
Yeah, I love. Yeah, so I'm just in
Yeah.
the app right now, and I don't
Okay.
know. I'll have to maybe
Okay.
offline after we can.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And then, okay. So I guess my last question is like, first of all, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want people to know? And then I know if there's anything specific for creatives, for sensitive people,
Mhm.
highly sensitive people, like within this, whether entrepreneur space, business space, or just in general, like how they can kind of integrate that with their professional life.
Yeah. And so I think that it's like don't just like truly start to look at your emotions as a superpower. And I hated it when people said that to me, but I've embraced it now and just know that this is a tool for you to use. And when you're already in tune with your emotions, you have a step up. Like you actually are ahead of the game because you're sensing, you're feeling, you're connected to yourself and you're connected to other people. And so really just know and trust like, okay, this is a good tool, and then start to play around, start to develop your trust with it and really tuning into them. And so again, this can be that locate, label, accept. That's always something that I go back to, and then start small. You don't need to like go in and try to learn to, we'll use the word like master your emotions when you're in a heated argument, but start to pay attention to with yourself. Maybe it's at lunch break. I love the concept of creating a new habit with a habit that you already have, or when you're brushing your teeth, be like, how do I feel? Because it's like I think that people can be feelers and we can be really emotional, but we're still not sure how we feel. And so just start to do something really small and tune into like, how do I feel right now? How does this make me feel? In business and in life, I try not to make any decisions when I'm on a high or on a low. And so it's okay to be excited about something, write ideas. Like I have so many ideas coming to me all the time and I'll get really excited. It's like, okay, cool. Now let's actually let this all sink in. And then it's always sort of like how does it feel in my mind? How does it feel in my heart? How does it feel in my gut? Do that. Do that check. And sometimes you need to give yourself time to calm down, to get grounded. Maybe it's a day or two, maybe it's a week, maybe it's an hour. But yeah, and it really is just starting to like give them a seat at the table and give yourself time. Don't think that you ever need to agree to something in the moment. I know I've said yes. I was a former recovering people pleaser over here, and I saw something on Instagram the other day that says November, say no to all these things, and I'm like, oh, that's so good. um but what can you like, knowing that you don't need to say yes and giving yourself the space to have time to truly think about what's best for you, so that you're not making decisions based off of your own emotions, whether good or bad in the moment, or over the emotions of someone else if you are really empathic and feeling that. And so I've just gotten into the habit of saying, even if I'm having a client meeting, I'm like, oh my God, this is the perfect project, the perfect client. I'll say, okay, great. It was wonderful connecting with you today. I'm going to take a week or two or take a few days and think about everything, and I'll get back to you. So always just having your statement, like what's your statement? If you're someone who reacts and says yes or no to things in the moment, it's like knowing yourself and having like, what's your go-to going to be, so that you can give yourself that space for making for making decisions from a really grounded space where you're taking in all things into consideration.
And I do have one more question.
Okay, awesome.
So I would love to. I have to look at your chart afterwards. But
Okay.
how do you integrate the splenic response with the emotions? Because I think this is actually a perfect example of you run your design. Your design doesn't run you, because theoretically you need to be making decisions like in the moment like that when your spleen hits.
Mm,
But obviously, like without seeing all the placements of everything, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
I'm just going on knowing that you're splenic. But how do you integrate that with the emotions and making decisions?
Oh gosh, I think I'm learning how to do it still, but I do know like I would get really I do have instincts and I act on them, and I've gotten myself into so many pickles by doing that. Like honestly, then I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm totally overwhelmed. I've said yes to everything, or I said yes to this without factoring in this." And so that's truly why I've given myself this rule to like not like I've given myself like, yeah, like cool, the really exciting, let's follow up and connect more. Like, yeah, that sounds great, but let's connect to talk about details, or let's connect to make sure it's a mutual fit or mutually aligned. So that's a go-to for me now. Yeah. And then what was the other thing? Something else came to mind that, oh yeah, this I judged myself so much for this, but there's been times where I've actually, I don't want to say backed out, but I'm like, this isn't truly aligned with me. I said I had that instinct in the moment, maybe out of the other person's excitement too, right? Like, I don't know what it was, but I've committed to things and then I'm in it. And this, like, my best friend, she's all about integrity and you do what you say you're going to do and you stay committed and no matter what. And I'm like, but at what expense? Like, truly, at what expense do you stay committed? And is that more ethical if I'm showing up and I'm hating every minute and I'm putting this negative energy into it? Or if it's truly not a fit and I see it? And so that's been the other part. And then it's like, well, I don't want to be known as flaky. I don't want to let people down. I don't want to be unprofessional. But I think that there's actually a really mature professional aspect of realizing when something isn't fitting. And I truly believe that's what's best for one person is what's best for the other. What's best for me is what's best for the client in the end. And there's been so many times where I'm like, oh, but how will they survive? And it's like, no, that's my ego. They're going to be better off without me and I'll be better off without them.
Yeah. I literally just want to let what you said sit for a second, because I think like I've always been known to be like the flaky one, or like there's like a couple people in my life that are just like, you can't quit things. You have to follow through. And like you said, to what expense? Like my emotions, my happiness, my mental health, like I'm sorry, I can't follow through on the things. But with it saying that, it's like if I had come into it in an aligned space and from an actual space of like what I actually wanted instead of just committing to something, probably would have been a different outcome. But I do believe, like, I think there's this ideal in the States where it's just like, or not in the States, but just culturally, right? Like in the world, like there's this ideal that we have to follow through on like every single thing. And I understand there's a professionalism that's involved there, especially in business. But also like, yeah, if it's not honoring me and if I'm doing something half-assed, or if it's just going to be like tension and we're going to have like break our relationship at the end of it because of it, I think it is really important to follow yourself and your emotions. And I think like my mental health should come first sometimes not sometimes, all the times. My mental health should come first all the time. Right. And it's just really interesting because I know that I can be seen as flaky a lot of times. And there's like one specific person that always stands out in my mind that's just like, oh, you quit everything. I'm like, you don't quit everything. Like the things that I'm passionate about, the things that I love, and the things that I enter into correctly. And that's a process for me, is entering into things correctly, more things correctly than just being like, yes, 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 yes. Like I said, with the photography, I would say yes to everything. And then I wouldn't have the energy for it. Cause I'm just like, this doesn't feel good to me. So thank you for saying that. That's really powerful. And that was really validating for me personally.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's a good reminder for me as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you would like to let people know, where they can find you, anything you've got going on? The podcast, of course, I'll link everything in the show notes, but just let us know.
Yeah, awesome. So you can, if you go to theglowjo.com, and that's GLOWJO, it's like a modern day online dojo. If for anybody who knows what a dojo is, it's just a fun play on like a space for the creative feelers to come get new tools. I'm in the process of creating a couple of fun freebies right now. And so if you go get on my newsletter list, then you'll definitely be updated when those are ready. And then, on Instagram, I'm over on Instagram at the Glowjo and at Leanne Kallal. And I'm in the process of planning some fun things for the new year. So I look forward to, connecting with anyone who wants to chat more and continue the conversation.
Yes. Well, amazing. Thank you so much. This conversation has been beautiful.
Thank you for having me here today.
Of course.
It was such a pleasure and an honor. And I look forward to just continuing to connect with you more. It's been great.
Yeah. Same here.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Okay. So now we just let it sit for a minute. Is that what you?
And so then stop